Behind Eddie Murphy's royal comedy lies a treasure trove of Hollywood secrets that'll blow your mind. From legendary musicians composing fake jingles to makeup so convincing it fooled Oprah for decades, Coming to America harbors bizarre production stories, shocking lawsuits, and unexpected cameos that transformed this 1988 classic into something far stranger than fiction. Prepare to discover the hidden world behind Zamunda's gates. Fact 1. Legendary producer's proudest moment was a fake ad. When Nile Rodgers calls the Soul Glow jingle his proudest musical achievement, it might sound like a joke, but the legendary producer is completely serious. Rodgers, the mastermind behind massive hits for Madonna, David Bowie, Diana Ross, and more recently, Daft Punk's Get Lucky, genuinely considers this 30-second fake commercial song from Coming to America to be his single greatest composition. The story behind this unlikely claim starts when director John Landis called Rodgers out of the blue in 1987. Landis admitted he didn't even know who Rodgers was, saying someone had told him that Rodgers was some kind of genius or something, and that he was working on a new Eddie Murphy picture. The film was originally called The Zamunda Project before becoming Coming to America, and this would be Rodgers' first major orchestral film score. The screenwriters, David Sheffield and Barry Blaustein, had written lyrics for a mock commercial advertising a hair product they initially called Afro Glow, which was later renamed to the catchier Soul Glow. They sent these lyrics to Rodgers, who then composed the music and enlisted rock singer Christopher Max to perform the vocals that would become immortalized in pop culture. The Soul Glow commercial was designed to parody the many hair care advertisements that played heavily in black communities during the 1980s, specifically targeting the popular Jerry curl hairstyle trend. The fake ad shows off an oily, glistening hair product with the unforgettable tagline sung by Max in an over-the-top style. Rodgers later explained his philosophy about this seemingly throwaway composition, recalling advice from a jazz teacher who told him that even Sugar Sugar by the Archies spoke to the souls of millions of strangers. For Rodgers, the Soul Glow jingle represents the power of music to connect with people, regardless of whether it's a serious artistic statement or a silly commercial parody. He's even performed the jingle during live concerts, including a memorable 2023 NPR Tiny Desk concert that surprised fans when his backing band broke into the familiar tune. Fact 2. Eddie Murphy seduced an elderly woman in disguise. Eddie Murphy once successfully charmed an elderly woman and got her phone number while wearing full old-age makeup, and she had absolutely no idea she was talking to one of Hollywood's biggest movie stars. This bizarre incident happened during the production of Coming to America, when makeup artist Rick Baker was testing the effectiveness of his elaborate prosthetic designs. Baker, who was already famous for his groundbreaking work on films like An American Werewolf in London and Michael Jackson's Thriller music video, had created incredibly realistic aging makeup for Murphy and Arsenio Hall to transform them into elderly barbershop customers. The makeup was so detailed and convincing that it took up to 6 hours to apply and made the actors completely unrecognizable, even to people who knew them well. During the testing phase, Baker encouraged Murphy and Hall to take their characters out into the real world to see how well the disguises would hold up under normal circumstances. Baker told them to just try it out, move their faces around, and see how the makeup worked in actual interactions with strangers. This was both a practical test of the prosthetic's durability and a way to make sure the actors could move and speak naturally while wearing the heavy facial appliances. Murphy decided to really put the makeup to the test by approaching an elderly woman while in full costume as Saul, the old Jewish man character from the barbershop scenes. Not only did the woman completely believe that Murphy was actually an elderly gentleman, but she was apparently so charmed by his conversation that she willingly gave him her phone number when he asked for it. The woman had no clue that she was actually talking to the 27-year-old comedy superstar behind Beverly Hills Cop and Saturday Night Live. Arsenio Hall later recounted this story during interviews, explaining how amazed they all were that Rick Baker's makeup work was so convincing it could fool people in close personal conversations. The incident proved that the prosthetics weren't just movie magic that worked on camera, but were realistic enough to completely transform the actors in real-life situations where people could examine them up close. Fact 3. The restaurant was actually a Wendy's for 3 weeks. The iconic McDowell's restaurant where Prince Akeem and Semi work in Coming to America wasn't built on a movie set. but was actually a real Wendy's fast food location that the production temporarily transformed for filming. The restaurant was located at 8507 Queens Boulevard in Elmhurst, Queens, and the film crew converted it into the fictional McDonald's knockoff for 3 weeks during production in 1988. This wasn't just a quick exterior shot either, as McDowell's serves as a central location throughout the movie where much of the romantic plot unfolds. Akeem takes a job there as a cleaner to get close to Lisa McDowell, the owner's daughter, and several important scenes play out inside the restaurant, including the memorable robbery attempt and various interactions between the characters. The production team had to completely redecorate the interior and exterior of the Wendy's to create the distinctive McDowell's look, complete with new signage, different uniforms, and modified menu boards. The choice to use a real Wendy's location created some interesting legal complications during production. Because of the obvious similarity between the fictional McDowell's name and the real McDonald's Corporation, the film's producers had to obtain special permission from McDonald's before they could use the McDowell's name in the movie. The situation became even more complicated when the owner of a nearby actual McDonald's restaurant discovered that a movie was being filmed at what appeared to be a competing burger joint and threatened to file a lawsuit, not realizing that the McDowell's restaurant was completely fictional and part of a Hollywood production. The building itself has an interesting fate that mirrors the rapid changes happening in New York City real estate. The original Wendy's location where McDowell's was filmed no longer exists today, as the entire block was eventually demolished to make way for a large apartment complex. Movie fans who try to visit the famous filming location will find only modern condominiums where the restaurant once stood, making the film's footage some of the only remaining evidence of what that corner of Queens Boulevard looked like during the late 1980s. Fact 4. Paula Abdul was only 18 when she choreographed the wedding. Future pop superstar Paula Abdul was just 18 years old when she was hired to choreograph the elaborate African wedding dance sequences in Coming to America, making this one of her earliest major Hollywood projects before she became famous as a singer and television personality. At the time of filming, Abdul was still working as a cheerleader and choreographer for the Los Angeles Lakers, having recently been promoted to head choreographer for the famous Laker girls after joining the squad at age 18. The opportunity came about because director John Landis specifically wanted to work with the girl who choreographed Janet Jackson, referring to Abdul's groundbreaking music video work with the pop star on hits like Nasty and Control. Abdul recalls arriving at her meeting with Landis carrying only a briefcase containing videotapes of her Laker girl routines and some of Janet Jackson's music videos, representing the entirety of her professional portfolio at that point in her career. When Landis first met Abdul in the waiting area, he was shocked by her youthful appearance and asked, "What are you, 17?" When she responded that she was 19 and turning 18, he initially had doubts about whether someone so young and inexperienced could handle the complex choreography requirements for a major Hollywood production. However, Abdul convinced him to give her a chance by offering to work with dancers in a workshop setting, creating sample choreography that he could evaluate before making his final decision. Abdul was already acquainted with Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall because they were season ticket holders for Lakers games, though they didn't know she was the choreographer behind the dance routines they watched during halftime shows. Her work on Coming to America became one of the achievements she's most proud of in her career, and she later described the African-inspired wedding choreography as representing some of her most creative and culturally significant work. The success of her choreography in Coming to America helped establish Abdul as a sought-after choreographer in Hollywood, leading to additional film work and eventually contributing to her transition into a recording career that would make her one of the biggest pop stars of the early 1990s. Fact 5. A multi-million-dollar lawsuit exposed Hollywood's unconscionable accounting. Art Buchwald's lawsuit against Paramount Pictures over Coming to America became one of the most important legal cases in Hollywood history, not just because he won, but because it exposed the shady accounting practices that studios use to avoid paying writers and actors their fair share of profits. The Pulitzer Prize-winning humorist filed the lawsuit in 1988, claiming that Paramount had stolen his story idea and turned it into Eddie Murphy's hit comedy without giving him credit or compensation. Buchwald had originally sold a 3-page treatment called King for a Day to Paramount in 1983. which told the story of an African ruler who comes to America and gets involved in comic adventures after being deposed from his throne. The studio spent 2 years and $500,000 developing 3 different scripts based on Buchwald's concept before abandoning the project in 1985. 2 years later, Paramount began production on Coming to America, which followed a remarkably similar plot about an African prince who travels to the United States. The first phase of the trial focused on whether Coming to America was actually based on Buchwald's original story treatment. In January 1990, Judge Harvey Schneider ruled in Buchwald's favor, finding that Paramount had indeed used his concept as the foundation for the Eddie Murphy film. The judge emphasized that his decision wasn't meant to disparage Murphy's creative contributions, but rather to hold Paramount accountable for their contractual obligations to Buchwald. The second phase of the trial became even more explosive when it examined how much money Buchwald should receive from the film's profits. Despite Coming to America earning over $288 million worldwide, Paramount claimed the movie had generated zero net profit according to their accounting methods. Judge Schneider called these accounting practices unconscionable and threw out Buchwald's contract entirely, ruling that the studio's profit-sharing formula was so unfair it was legally unenforceable. Facing the possibility of more lawsuits from other writers and actors, Paramount eventually settled with Buchwald and his producer partner for $900,000. Fact 6. Louis Anderson was cast because studios demanded somebody white. Eddie Murphy revealed in a candid 2021 interview that comedian Louis Anderson's role as Maurice, the McDowell's employee, was specifically added to the film because Paramount Pictures executives insisted on having at least one white actor in the cast. Murphy explained the situation bluntly during his appearance on The Today Show, saying that the studio told them, "We have to have somebody white in it. We're not making the movie without somebody white in it." This demand came about because Coming to America featured a predominantly black cast, which was relatively unusual for major Hollywood productions in the late 1980s. The main characters were all played by black actors, including Murphy, Arsenio Hall, James Earl Jones, John Amos, Madge Sinclair, and Sherry Headley, and the studio apparently felt this would limit the film's commercial appeal to mainstream audiences. Rather than being a creative decision based on the story or character development, Anderson's casting was purely a business decision driven by studio executives' concerns about marketability. According to both Murphy and Hall, Paramount provided them with a list of 3 white performers to choose from for inclusion in the film. Murphy and Hall ultimately selected Louis Anderson because they already knew him personally and enjoyed working with him, making the best of what was essentially a forced casting situation. Anderson played Maurice, a friendly but somewhat bumbling employee at the fast food restaurant where the main characters work, and his scenes provided comic relief throughout the movie. The revelation about Anderson's casting sheds light on the behind-the-scenes pressures that filmmakers faced when trying to create movies with diverse casts during this era of Hollywood. While Coming to America became a massive box office success, earning over $288 million worldwide and proving that audiences would embrace films with primarily black casts, the studio's initial hesitation reflects the industry's lack of confidence in stories that didn't center white characters. Anderson himself has never publicly commented on the circumstances of his casting, but his performance became a memorable part of the film despite the unusual way his role came about. Fact 7. James Earl Jones and Madge Sinclair played royalty twice. James Earl Jones and Madge Sinclair, who portrayed the regal King Jaffe Joffer and Queen Aeolian of Zamunda in Coming to America, reunited 6 years later to play another royal couple in one of Disney's most beloved animated films. In 1994, the same 2 actors provided the voices for Mufasa and Sarabi, the Lion King and Queen in Disney's The Lion King, creating a unique connection between these 2 very different movies about African royalty. The casting choice wasn't just a coincidence, but rather a deliberate decision by Disney's filmmakers who were impressed by the chemistry and gravitas that Jones and Sinclair brought to their roles as monarchs in Coming to America. Both actors had already established themselves as commanding performers who could convey authority and wisdom, making them perfect choices for voicing the wise and noble lion rulers of Pride Rock. Jones's deep, resonant voice was particularly well-suited for Mufasa, the protective father figure, while Sinclair brought warmth and strength to Queen Sarabi. This connection between the two films becomes even more interesting when you consider that both movies deal with themes of African heritage, royal succession, and young princes coming of age. In Coming to America, Prince Akeem must learn to become a worthy king while finding love on his own terms, while in The Lion King, young Simba must overcome tragedy and exile to reclaim his rightful place as ruler. Both stories celebrate African culture and feature strong family bonds between royal parents and their children. Madge Sinclair brought particularly notable experience to both roles, having previously appeared in the groundbreaking television miniseries Roots, where she played Belle Reynolds, the mother of Kunta Kinte. Her powerful performances in projects that highlighted African and African-American experiences made her a natural choice for roles that required both dignity and emotional depth. Jones, already famous for voicing Darth Vader in the Star Wars films, added his distinctive vocal presence to both the Human King of Zamunda and the Lion King of Pride Rock, creating two memorable royal characters that showcased his incredible range as a voice actor. Fact 8. Cuba Gooding Jr. had a deleted scene about unpaid haircuts. Cuba Gooding Jr. made his film debut in Coming to America as a young customer getting a haircut in the barbershop scene, but his original role was much more substantial and included dialogue that was ultimately cut from the final version of the movie. The future Oscar winner was initially given a speaking part where his character would admit to Clarence, the barbershop owner played by Eddie Murphy in makeup, that he didn't have enough money to pay for his haircut after the service was already completed. The deleted scene would have shown Clarence responding to this news in a characteristically harsh way by shaving a noticeable bald patch right out of the young man's hair as punishment for not being able to pay. This moment was designed to demonstrate Clarence's no-nonsense attitude and add some physical comedy to the barbershop sequences, while also showing the tough neighborhood dynamics that Prince Akeem and Semi encounter when they venture into Queens looking for authentic American experiences. According to reports from the production, Gooding was disappointed when he learned that his speaking scene had been removed during the editing process, as it would have given him a more memorable moment in what was his very first movie appearance. At the time of filming, Gooding was still a relatively unknown actor trying to establish himself in Hollywood, and having dialogue in a major Eddie Murphy comedy could have provided valuable exposure for his career. In the final cut of the film, Gooding's character appears only briefly as background scenery in the barbershop, sitting in the chair getting a regular haircut while the main characters Eddie Murphy, Arsenio Hall, and other customers engage in conversations about boxing and local neighborhood topics. The scene that made it into the movie shows him as just another customer in the busy barbershop, without any of the conflict or comedy that his original scene was supposed to provide. The barbershop location served as an important gathering place in the film where Prince Akeem could observe authentic American life and meet local residents. But Gooding's expanded role would have added another layer to these community interactions by showing the economic realities that many neighborhood residents faced. Fact 9. The movie fooled Oprah Winfrey for decades. Oprah Winfrey, one of the most observant and media-savvy personalities in entertainment, watched Coming to America multiple times, over more than 3 decades without ever realizing that Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall were playing the elderly men in the barbershop scenes. This stunning revelation came to light during a recent interview when Murphy casually mentioned his role as the old Jewish character Saul, only to discover that Oprah had no idea what he was talking about. The moment happened when Murphy was discussing the barbershop scenes during an interview with Oprah, and he made a reference to playing the elderly Jewish man who sits around arguing with the other customers. Oprah's reaction was immediate and genuine surprise as she asked, "What do you mean? You're the Jewish man?" When Murphy confirmed that he was indeed the old man in the barbershop, Oprah responded with complete disbelief, saying she had watched both the original Coming to America and the sequel Coming to America without ever catching on to this detail. Murphy explained to late-night host Jimmy Kimmel that Oprah's reaction wasn't unusual, noting that a lot of people don't know that's us in those makeups because the prosthetic work was so convincing. The elaborate makeup created by Rick Baker was designed to be completely transformative, taking up to 6 hours to apply and making Murphy and Hall totally unrecognizable even to people who knew them personally. The makeup included detailed facial prosthetics, aging effects, and complete character transformations that changed everything from their skin texture to their facial bone structure. Murphy doesn't blame anyone for missing this detail because the makeup work was intentionally designed to be so realistic that viewers would believe they were watching actual elderly actors rather than young stars in disguise. The barbershop characters of Clarence, Saul, and Morris became beloved parts of the film precisely because audiences accepted them as authentic neighborhood regulars rather than recognizing them as elaborate costume work. Oprah's decades-long confusion demonstrates just how successful Rick Baker's makeup artistry was at creating believable characters that could fool even the most experienced entertainment industry professionals. Fact 10. Eddie Murphy's uncle played the falling tenant. The man who tumbles down the stairs in the rundown apartment building where Prince Akeem and Semi live is actually Eddie Murphy's real-life uncle, Ray Murphy, making his one and only appearance in a Hollywood film. This brief but memorable scene occurs early in the movie when the main characters are exploring their new living situation in what's supposed to be Queens, and they encounter this unfortunate tenant who takes a dramatic spill down the building's staircase. Ray Murphy's cameo represents one of several family connections that Eddie Murphy included in Coming to America, as the comedy star was known for bringing relatives and close friends into his movie projects whenever possible. The role of the falling tenant, known in the credits simply as Stu, was specifically written to give Ray Murphy a moment on screen, even though it required him to perform what was essentially a physical comedy stunt that probably wasn't the most comfortable experience for someone who wasn't a professional actor. The scene serves to establish the poor living conditions that Akeem and Semi encounter when they try to experience life as ordinary Americans rather than pampered royalty. The dilapidated apartment building, complete with its unfortunate residents like Ray Murphy's character, provides a stark contrast to the luxury palace they left behind in Zamunda. The falling incident adds both humor and realism to their fish-out-of-water experience, showing that their new neighborhood has genuine challenges and colorful characters. Ray Murphy's performance, while brief, became a recognizable moment for viewers who pay attention to the supporting characters in the film. His tumble down the stairs is both comedic and slightly concerning, fitting perfectly with the movie's tone of finding humor in everyday situations while still acknowledging the real difficulties that people face in urban environments. The fact that this small but noticeable role went to Eddie Murphy's uncle demonstrates the family-oriented approach that the star took to filmmaking, using his success to provide opportunities for relatives who might not otherwise have had the chance to appear in a major Hollywood production. Fact 11. Trading Places characters returned as homeless cameos. Don Ameche and Ralph Bellamy made a surprise return to the Eddie Murphy universe by reprising their roles as Mortimer and Randolph Duke from the 1983 comedy Trading Places, appearing in Coming to from Prince Akeem. This clever cameo serves as a direct sequel to the events of Trading Places, showing what happened to the wealthy Duke brothers after they were financially ruined by Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd's characters in the earlier film. In Trading Places, the Duke brothers were portrayed as ruthless commodities traders who treated people like pawns in their cruel social experiments, manipulating the lives of a street hustler and a wealthy executive just to settle a $1 bet about nature versus nurture. By the end of that movie, Murphy and Aykroyd's characters had turned the tables on the Dukes, using insider trading information to bankrupt the brothers and destroy their financial empire in a satisfying act of revenge. The Coming to America cameo shows the long-term consequences of that financial destruction, with both Ameche and Bellamy appearing as disheveled homeless men begging for money on the streets of New York. When Prince Akeem encounters them during a romantic walk with Lisa, he generously gives them a large wad of cash, without knowing their history or significance. Upon receiving the unexpected windfall, Bellamy's character delivers the perfect callback line, "We're back," suggesting that this money might give them a chance to rebuild their fortunes. Director John Landis, who had worked with both actors on Trading Places, included this cameo as both a tribute to the earlier film and a way to create continuity between the two Eddie Murphy comedies. The scene even features a brief musical cue from the Trading Places soundtrack to help alert observant viewers to the connection. This crossover moment was particularly meaningful for fans of Trading Places, as it provided a satisfying update on what happened to these memorable villains, while also demonstrating Prince Akeem's generous nature as he unknowingly helps two former millionaires get back on their feet. Fact 12. The apartments were in Brooklyn, not Queens. The rundown apartment building where Prince Akeem and Semi lived during their time in America was actually located in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Despite the movie clearly stating that the characters had moved to Queens, the building used for filming stands at 392 South 5th Street near Hooper Street in Brooklyn, creating a geographic inconsistency that most viewers never notice while watching the film. This location switch happened because the production team needed to find a building that looked appropriately deteriorated and represented the kind of low-income housing that the wealthy princes would encounter when trying to live like ordinary Americans. The Williamsburg location in the late 1980s provided exactly the right visual atmosphere, with its rundown brick buildings, fire escapes, and urban decay that contrasted sharply with the opulent palace they had left behind in Zamunda. The apartment building served as the location for several important scenes in the movie, including the characters' first encounter with their gruff landlord, played by Frankie Faison, and various interactions with other tenants like Eddie Murphy's uncle Ray Murphy, who played the man who falls down the stairs. The barbershop scenes were also filmed in the same building, with the shop located on the ground floor of the structure, making it a central location for much of the film's New York-based action. Local residents who lived in the area during filming still remember when the movie crew arrived to shoot scenes at the building, and some have noted the irony that their Brooklyn neighborhood was standing in for Queens throughout the production. The building itself has become somewhat of a landmark for fans of the movie who make pilgrimages to see the real-life location where these iconic scenes were filmed. The discrepancy between the stated location and the actual filming spot reflects the common practice in movie production of using whatever locations work best visually and logistically, regardless of whether they match the story's geography exactly. For Coming to America, the Williamsburg building provided the perfect backdrop for showing the culture shock that the pampered princes experienced when forced to live in genuinely modest circumstances. Fact 13. Samuel L. Jackson's first big role was robbing McDowell's. Samuel L. Jackson made one of his earliest significant film appearances in Coming to America as an armed robber who repeatedly targets the McDowell's restaurant years before he became one of Hollywood's most recognizable and prolific actors. At the time of filming in 1988, Jackson was still a relatively unknown performer trying to establish himself in the movie industry, and this small but memorable role helped showcase the intense screen presence that would later make him famous. Jackson's character appears as a persistent criminal who has apparently made a habit of robbing the fast food restaurant, with other characters in the film mentioning that he has held up McDowell's at least 5 times before. During his robbery scene, Jackson delivers one of his most quotable lines from the film when he aggressively tells the restaurant owner, "Don't stall me, fat boy," while demanding money from the cash register, displaying the kind of commanding authority and intimidating energy that would become his trademark in later action films. The role came about through Jackson's friendship with Eddie Murphy, as the two actors had known each other for several years before Coming to America was produced. Murphy was instrumental in getting Jackson cast in the film, recognizing his talent and wanting to give his friend an opportunity to appear in what was expected to be a major Hollywood comedy. This early collaboration between Murphy and Jackson demonstrates the importance of professional relationships and mutual support among actors who were working to advance their careers during this period. Jackson's performance as the hold-up man stands out even in his brief screen time because of the intensity and realism he brought to the role, making the robbery scene genuinely tense despite the overall comedic tone of the movie. His appearance in Coming to America represents an important stepping stone in his career trajectory, as it came during the period when he was transitioning from smaller theater and television work to more substantial film roles that would eventually lead to his breakthrough performances in films like Jungle Fever and Pulp Fiction just a few years later. Fact 14. A real African prince sued for stealing his life story. After Coming to America became a box office hit, an actual African prince filed a lawsuit against the production, claiming that Eddie Murphy had stolen his real-life story and used it as the basis for the movie without permission or compensation. This surprising legal action was just one of 5 different lawsuits that were filed against the film following its release, creating a wave of legal challenges that the studio had to address in the aftermath of the movie's commercial success. The prince's lawsuit alleged that his personal experiences as African royalty traveling to America closely mirrored the plot of Coming to America, suggesting that Murphy and the screenwriters had somehow learned about his life story and adapted it for their screenplay without his knowledge or consent. While the specific details of this prince's identity and his exact claims have not been widely publicized, his lawsuit represents one of the more unusual legal challenges that Hollywood productions sometimes face when real people believe their lives have been depicted on screen without authorization. This particular lawsuit was separate from the more famous legal battle involving humorist Art Buchwald, who had sold a story treatment to Paramount that bore similarities to the final film. The prince's case represented a different type of claim entirely, focusing on alleged unauthorized use of someone's actual life experiences rather than a written story treatment or screenplay that had been pitched to the studio through official channels. The fact that Coming to America attracted multiple lawsuits from different sources highlights how the film's basic premise of an African royal coming to America was apparently similar to various real-life situations and previously written stories. The production faced legal challenges from professional writers, actual royalty, and several other parties who felt their ideas or experiences had been used without proper credit or compensation. While most of these lawsuits were eventually resolved through settlements or dismissals, they demonstrate the complex legal landscape that successful movies sometimes navigate, especially when they deal with scenarios that might parallel real-world experiences or previously developed concepts that multiple people could claim ownership over in various ways. Fact 15. The makeup took 6 hours and cost Murphy movement. Eddie Murphy revealed that the elaborate makeup transformations created by Rick Baker for Coming to America required up to 6 hours in the makeup chair for each character, and the heavy prosthetic appliances significantly limited his ability to move naturally while performing. Murphy has described the lengthy process as rewarding but not fun at all, because the makeup artists still haven't figured out how to make the transformation any shorter, even decades later, when the techniques were updated for the sequel, Coming to America. The extensive makeup process involved applying multiple layers of foam latex prosthetics, aging effects, and detailed facial modifications that completely changed Murphy's appearance from a young man in his 20s into convincing elderly characters like the Jewish barbershop customer Saul and the shop owner Clarence. Baker and his team had to carefully sculpt and attach each piece of the prosthetic makeup, then blend everything together seamlessly before applying the final paint and finishing touches that made the characters look completely real. Murphy explained that the characters actually came to life during the makeup application process, as Baker would start asking him questions about the character's background and personality when the makeup was about 80% complete. Murphy would try out different voices and mannerisms until he found the right combination that looked natural coming from that particular face, essentially developing the character's personality while sitting in the makeup chair. The trade-off for this incredible realism was that the heavy prosthetics made Murphy and Arsenio Hall appear weirdly immobile on screen, as the thick latex and adhesives restricted their facial expressions and head movements. The makeup was so thick and detailed that it prevented the natural flexibility that actors normally rely on for physical comedy and subtle expressions, forcing them to adapt their performances to work within the limitations of the elaborate disguises. Despite these challenges, the makeup work was so effective that it earned Rick Baker an Academy Award nomination for Best Makeup and fooled countless viewers who had no idea they were watching Murphy and Hall in disguise rather than actual elderly actors hired to play these neighborhood characters.